Hello and welcome to the Rethinking Cyber podcast with me, Rebecca McLaughlin-Easton. In this third series, you'll hear my in-depth and thought-provoking conversations about the challenges and opportunities shaping our cyber future, as I sit down with some of the world's greatest minds, visionaries, leaders and policymakers. Today, my special guest is Pascal Lamy, the former Director-General of the World Trade Organization. He began his career in the French civil service at the Ministry of Economy and Finance. He became an advisor to the Finance Minister Jacques Delors and subsequently to Prime Minister Pierre Mauroy. He went on to become Chief of Staff for the President of the European Commission and his representative as Sherpa in the G7. In the years that followed, he was also Commissioner for Trade at the European Commission, and he is currently Vice President of the Paris Peace Forum. In recent times, Pascal has advised international organizations and global think tanks on the need for collaboration and collective action in the face of rapid innovation, and he's co-authored a book on the potential of regulated globalization, which can serve as a foundation for building trust in cyberspace. I spoke to Pascal on the sidelines of the Global Cybersecurity Forum's annual meeting in Riyadh. Pascal Lamy, it's wonderful to have you in the podcast studio. Thank you for being here. We can hear the hubbub of the GCF Forum just behind us. How have you enjoyed it?
Well, it's a very vibrant place, and I'm learning, which at my advanced stage is a big privilege.
Well, we're delighted to hear that GCF is knowledge sharing with esteemed delegates like yourself. To that end, what has surprised you? What has been learned?
What I'm learning and what I'm trying to learn better is how can you connect all the dots that we have to connect in order, for instance, to increase cybersecurity. I was born in an old world where you could see things, you could touch things, where what you would exchange and trade was goods, beginning of services. We are now in a totally different world where a lot of what we exchange you can't touch, you can't see. Data, services, health, accounting, transport, media, and this creates a totally different infrastructure for politicians, but not only policymakers and sovereigns, also many other stakeholders can together cooperate in order to make these systems better, more risk-averse, safer, and sometimes just safe in order to protect our population.
You speak of a world with intangible exchanges and services and the issues that can create, the obstacles. Equally, if we consider a borderless concept of cyberspace, what there might be some of the concerns and the challenges, but also perhaps the interoperable opportunities that presents?
Well, I think we have a paradox, which is that in some ways, not always, but in some ways, the physical world was more borderless than the digital one. I think this is a reality, which is why in the old world, a lot of what we had to do internationally was convergence. WTO, WHO, the UN system, the IMF, the International Aviation Organization, the Animal Health Organization were about common rules which were roughly the same for everybody, not in all areas. So there was a lot of convergence and a bit of coexistence. The digital world is the other way around. For a number of reasons, the raw material of this new economy, which is data, is something with which the mental relationship you have is different. In some cases, it has to be sold and bought on a market. This is the US system. In some cases, it has to be available to the state in any circumstances. This is the Chinese system. In other cases, we Europeans believe that there is a lot of individual rights attached to data, including, for instance, data privacy. So, in painting this very sketchy picture, I'm painting a divided world. A world where, because of different collective preferences, the relationship we have to the digital flows is different. On the other hand, this will create different systems. But we all know that there is still a big efficiency in the systems working together trans-border. We have probably, as I said, digital borders which are thicker than borders for shirts or for bicycles. But on the other hand, it has to remain as interoperable as possible. And this is where the coexistence dimension comes in. If we cannot achieve convergence for legitimate reasons, then we have to put an accent on coexistence, i.e. interoperability.
If we look at globalization, in your opinion, how might the growing role of cyberspace impact globalization's trajectory?
I think the cyberspace is a good example of how globalization works today. So it is global and it is contributing to globalization, understood as the permanent increase of exchange of value between countries and people. And this world is still globalizing. If you look at the indicators of physical trade, it still is increasing. And if you look at the indicators of digital trade, it's rocketing exponentially. So don't you tell me that this world is not globalizing. But it is globalizing in a different way than before. And again, this balance between what we have to do together the same way and what we agree can be done differently, provided we have the right bridges between the countries above these digital frontiers, is, I think, absolutely key to our future, both for efficiency reasons and for security reasons.
You've touched upon it, but more specifically, how can nations best work together in a truly globalized sense to really ensure that cyberspace brings about benefits not only for societies and communities, but economically too? What are the greatest barriers we need to remove, the issues we need to resolve to really make that happen?
We have a cyber security issue. I don't think the solution lies in a global international cybersecurity accord. The problems we have to face are different. They are much more complex. But I believe that we have to slice the problems and address them one by one. Probably, not just between states, sovereigns, but also together with other actors of the cyber world, like a number of major digital multinational companies, like a number of big cities, like a number of big academic institutions, with probably NGOs. So if it's about the safety of submarine cables or satellites on the lower orbit, it's not the same problem as the problem we have on cybercrime. It's not the same problem as the problem we have with AI lethal weapons. They're all there, but we should not, I think, try to mix everything. Otherwise, we will not be able to progress in what we need, which is a proper level of normalization, standardization, roughly global governance.
Wearing your former WTO hat for me, how have global trade mechanisms historically responded to technology revolutions such as the internet? And how might today's emerging technologies continue to impact trade?
There is a formidable potential in these new technologies to facilitate trade. Take customs procedures, for instance, which still matter. Whether it's paperwork or digitalized makes a huge difference because it allows much smaller fishes in the economic system to navigate rather than in the past where you had to be a big company to be able to afford all the costs and frictions of paperwork in order to trade. So no doubt this is a big progress. And by the way, the World Trade Organization has now worked and the members of the WTO, at least some of them, have agreed on a package that makes digital trade easier with precisely standards, common norms, and the common recognition of a number of principles which base digital trade. So I think the WTO can do more, but they've started moving in this direction. Inevitably, you find, if you try to facilitate digital trade, the same problem about ownership of data, capacity to localize data, what you do with data flows, whether, for instance, digital services should be taxed or not taxed. Inevitably, you find these problems, but the direction of travel is facilitating, reducing obstacles to trade through these new means.
Is there one trend or advancement that you would point to that you really believe will have the most significant impact on economic growth in the coming years?
Climate change and digitalization are the two main forces that are shaping today's world. One is an existential one. We have to keep this planet livable, and we're not there yet. The other is more offensive because there is a capacity in science, technology, digital, AI to shorten a lot of what at the time was taking a long time. These are two things I think will trend. And I'm working a lot on the digital twin of the ocean in order to try and understand quicker and better the problem we have with the ocean through the digital equivalent of an ocean, which then you can modelize and interact with. This is an example of how AI, data, can do a lot to help us better regenerating our ocean, hence improving our capacity to fight against climate change.
For those unfamiliar, you're referring to the Mission Starfish 2030, and indeed you are the chair of the Mission Ocean Board. So tell me, how are things proceeding with that project? What stage is it currently at?
We will, we Europeans, and I'm heading the European effort in this direction, we will table the first full-fledged version of a European digital twin next year in June 2025 at the third United Nations Ocean Conference in France.
Well, we very much look forward to hearing more about it, perhaps when we next meet at GCF. Speaking of which, and reflecting on your time at the annual meeting of 2024, it was, as always, a multi-stakeholder approach with governments, thought leaders, academics, tech giants, innovators, and many more on the ground. Were the right people in the room, in your opinion?
Well, that's the right format. That's the format we have adopted at the Paris Peace Forum in 2018. And by the way, I believe there is probably more to do in connecting the Paris Peace Forum with the Global Cybersecurity Forum. We start from the same premise. It's issues that you only can address in a multi-stakeholders way. Leaving diplomats alone around the table will not work. You need something which is more diverse and which I called here in Riyadh polylateralism, as opposed to multilateralism, which was the old Westphalian sovereign-to-sovereign system. We need something which is more diverse, more inclusive, and more prone to action and impact, which the experience we have with the Paris Peace Forum is what these purpose-led coalitions can do, whereas sovereigns have a hard time doing it anymore.
Cybersecurity is a team sport, as we've heard here on the ground.
Absolutely. It's an excellent example of how we need to change the way we organize and frame international cooperation.
And there we have to leave our conversation. But Pascal Lamy, it's been a pleasure to speak with you today. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, many thanks to you.
And And so it also remains for me to thank you, our global audience, for listening. And you can find more conversations like the one you just heard on Apple and Spotify. Another podcast episode is coming very soon, so be sure to follow GCF on social media for updates. And I very much look forward to welcoming you on the ground at the 2025 annual meeting of the Global Cybersecurity Forum. Until then, take care and goodbye.